Well, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning still. Pleasure to be here at this conference, and thank you, Chris and Eric, for hosting us. It's an incredible time. I think yesterday we listened to the panel and several of the presentations, so I wanted to just start today's presentation with a bit of a backdrop here. I think when we're coming to these types of conferences, or just looking at the broader picture, Chris has made a comment several times in terms of being a really excellent stock picker at this moment in time. Well, the characteristics that I look for, I'm sure we all look for in terms of good investment ideas, is recognizing that there's some sort of fair value in the marketplace, looking at where the underlying value is and how that's going to increase over time. These growth stories, and such as the one I'm going to be speaking about today and other presentations that you've heard in this meeting, it has to demonstrate some kind of logical, rational business value. And I think one of the easiest things to try to decipher is if you can follow how to get from point A to point B in terms of that value growth. Of course, we're also looking for liquidity and understanding the product risks that are associated with it. And above all, making sure it's a regulated industry. So with that backdrop, I'm going to be talking to you about a really novel, interesting approach in terms of drug development, and specifically what we're doing in terms of creating an ophthalmology pipeline. I will be making some forward-looking statements, so please review our risk factors in our SEC filings, and if you have any questions, you can always contact the company. Just in terms of a historical perspective, what we've seen in this particular industry in the last 30, 40 years, it always starts from somewhere, and there's a genesis of this development going back to the early 60s, where a scientist was interested in isolating specific cannabinoids, and that has progressed over time. And this slide is really to demonstrate that these things usually do take a certain amount of time in terms of looking at it from a time versus impact perspective. I think it's interesting also in terms of the macro point of view that we're beginning to see a inflection happening, and that inflection is because of the increased use of these types of medicines and how they've been starting to appear in terms of mainstream drug development. One of the most recognizable milestones that we've seen over the last 2 years was Epidiolex being approved as a drug by GW Pharma, and that's for a rare form of epilepsy. And then from there, earlier this year, we also saw another company that had a cannabinoid pharmaceutical in their development for IBS get acquired by Pfizer. So we're finally seeing that there's this broader recognition. I think that's also driven by the fact that you have big pharma that's always looking for innovative ideas to add to their pipeline, and if you can have the intellectual property and addressing the unmet medical need associated with particular diseases, I think this is where there can be that impact over time. And from a case study standpoint, this is just one way of looking at it. Here was a great validating event for the space where GW Pharma was acquired in 2021 for $7.2 billion. It was based on a neurological development pipeline that they had. Their most notable drug that was approved that was Epidiolex, and they've had some significant sales, and it's been a blockbuster. So kudos to them. Took them quite a long time to get to that point, and I'm going to try to speed up here and try to highlight that we're at Skye developing kind of a similar type of approach. It's taking the FDA regulated path for drug development, and our focus is on the ophthalmology pipeline. Here we're, instead of using a plant-derived cannabis product, we're focused on synthetic cannabinoid derivatives, so they're patented new chemical entities. We're actually going after, it's like a novel chemical entity, and what we're showing is that it's having improved delivery and a better targeting mechanism compared to the current class of drugs in the ophthalmology space. We're developing a broader pipeline, and I'm going to talk about one particular area today in terms of what's entering into the clinic. From an investment thesis perspective, just some very important takeaways. First, we're entering into the clinic based on this particular class and particular mechanism, and that's advancing what is targeting the CB1 receptor. I'll discuss that a bit more in a few slides. We're entering into the clinic this quarter, and then we're expecting to start our phase 2 study in Q4 of 2022, which would be an IND study. We do believe it's a transformative new class because the current landscape doesn't really have any of these types of medicines in development, and we would be the first in terms of that development. So that's quite exciting for us, and it's based on a solid footing in terms of clinical data and preclinical foundation. So we've done a lot of different testing in order to get to this critical milestone for this company, and we're quite excited about launching that trial. But broadly, all of that's possible based on a network of different scientists that are involved. And what I think has been really important for me in any company that I've been involved with is the connection to the academic centers of excellence that are advancing the science. So we have been very fortunate to be able to connect with some of the top academic centers of excellence around cannabinoids and ophthalmology, and that's part of where the company's success really lies. The end result here in terms of that roadmap I alluded to in the earlier part of the presentation of getting from point A to point B is a very proven path in drug development, right? We're not interested in commercializing this on our own. We would like to ultimately work with a larger partner, preferably an ophthalmology expert, preferably a larger ophthalmology and pharma that has the commercial expertise and capabilities. And that's the best way to do that in terms of getting and showing value creation for investors is a licensing event. And if you're really lucky, then it turns into an acquisition event if the pipeline and the overall company make a lot of sense. And I can tell you that this team that's been working on this has a proven record to do that. We've been collectively, the group that's running this company has had multiple exits with big pharma, and we're looking to replicate that in this class of medicine. So coming back to the big picture, 80% of what we perceive comes through the sense of sight. It's a phenomenal thing to just take a moment to think about. And decreasing eyesight can really impair many of the activities that are connected to quality of life. So that's where we feel that there's a large kind of opportunity in terms of the importance of eyesight. And we want to prevent these diseases that are linked to the eye, and most importantly, some of them that are actually accelerating vision loss. And vision loss itself is a very large burden in terms of the healthcare costs. It's estimated to be about $139 billion in terms of economic burden, and that's also a growing market. So, this is something in terms of a big picture, no pun intended, but it does address why new innovation is required in this particular field. We're narrowing in on one particular disease initially in our first clinical trial, and that's focused on glaucoma. Glaucoma is about a $7 billion market worldwide. It has over 80 million patients worldwide. But the larger dynamic in that is that 40% of these patients fail first-line therapy, and 50% of them require 2 or more therapies. So that's where we feel this type of innovation and the drug that we're developing really makes a difference. And nobody else is working on that. So this is just a quick funnel to show you that all the compounds that are currently in development really just fall into this existing class of medicines. And these numbers and these different lines represent the number of drugs that are in development in those particular stages. So, from a crowded market perspective, we're really standing out in terms of a class of medicine, and there's already commercial drugs in all of these buckets. So we're not interested in being a me too in this particular area. Discussing glaucoma for a second, just so everyone kind of gets oriented in terms of this disease. Basically, it's elevating the interocular pressure because the fluid that's in the eye, this was called aqueous humor, is not able to drain. And once that pressure is building up, it's having a degradation effect or pressure on the optic nerve, and it's crushing these cells called the retinal ganglion cells. So that crush-like injury is what's reducing the signal and the vision, potentially impacting vision loss. Often these patients are seeing blurry vision, pain, or other components, and they can't. And over time, they're losing their vision. Now, why cannabinoids offer a solution here is that we're targeting two parts of that. We're based on targeting the CB1 receptor, we're not only helping with the production of the fluid, we're also improving the drainage of the fluid. And that's the critical kind of difference. A lot of the drugs currently, they're just focused on the drainage side of it. And even if you kind of dig into it, it's really, they haven't really proven the mechanism underneath that. So this is specifically unique to our drug, where when we're targeting the CB1 receptor, you're able to optimize that drainage through the primary areas that drainage occurs, which is trabecular meshwork and the uveoscleral pathway. So we're really, I think, going after this the critical mechanism and really well understand that. There's been a lot of data historically that's also proven this based on inhalation of delta-9 THC. So this is mostly those people that have tried clinical trials that have used smoking to see what the reduction of intraocular pressure has been. But there's one here that the third from the bottom that is topical application, this WIN 55212, which was actually an eye drop and showed that IOP decreased through the same pathway that we're going after. So what we've done is take all that backdrop and really refined it into a very clear design for an effective therapy. We understand that THC can have this effect, but getting it into the eye has been difficult. So you look at the kind of left diagram here. If you just take an extract and drop it in the eye, it's not going to work because it's very lipophilic and it's not easily able to be absorbed. Just as you can imagine oil and water don't mix very well. What we've done is formulated a unique approach where we've added a unique chemical structure that allows that to penetrate into the eye, into the right parts of the eye, and then the THC can do its activity in terms of binding to the CB1 receptor. So it's a unique proprietary nanoemulsion formulation, and it's containing the active component, and it's all synthetically created. So there's nothing associated with the cannabis or the cannabis plant or anything like that. This is drug development. It's just going after pathways that we kind of use in the same nomenclature. We've demonstrated here with SPI 100 superior IOP lowering. So intraocular pressure is the main disease modifier you're looking for in development. We've shown that in single agent activity. On the left side of the screen, you can see that SPI 100 had a longer duration and a lower or a better performance in terms of IOP lowering than the standard of care, which was latanoprost. And we did that against timolol as well, which is a commonly used drug. And on the right side of this slide is the combination effect. So we've done SPI 100 in combination with what is now become a very important drug in terms of an option for patients, which is nutraceutol, which is a Rho kinase inhibitor. These Rho kinase inhibitors are targeting the same thing in terms of being able to improve the drainage by inhibiting Rho kinase. So that's, we're getting into the weeds in terms of the science, but what we've been able to show is SPI 100 in combination with that particular drug, was able to show better duration and for a longer period of time. So main takeaway here is it's targeting the disease, it's going after the particular parts of drainage, as well as the improvement of that flow. We have the potential to do as a single agent, have the potential as a combination. Obviously, it's a bit early here to kind of predict where the commercial output's going to look like, but that's, I think, where our expertise lies in terms of our development strategy. And then there's one area that we haven't really touched on today, is this neuroprotective component. And that's where I think it's quite exciting in terms of a blue sky potential, because these types of drugs, because of their multifactorial kind of attack in terms of the disease management, we have the potential for other things like anti-fibrosis or repairing function. So early data and evidence has shown that kind of activity, and we're continuing to evaluate that in terms of our development strategy. Phase 1 is our first milestone ahead of us. This is a study that will begin this quarter. It's a 48-patient study. It's designed in this 6-part visual that you've seen here. And 8 patients are enrolled in each cohort. Then after the first 3 cohorts are enrolled, we'll do a quick safety review, and then we'll enroll the next 3 in a higher dose. The goal here is to assess safety and tolerability of the drug, so it's quite exciting for us in terms of taking a novel drug all the way to this stage and now entering into the clinic. First time it's been done, and in fact, I'm quite excited. I joined this company in August of 2020. So in the last 18 months, despite all of these, externalities and other pressures in the market and stuff like that, we have really stayed the course in terms of going from basically ground zero to entering the clinic, and we're looking forward to seeing what that data reveals. Beyond the clinical program, we are also working on some exciting R&D. So this is, another perspective of looking at the broader ophthalmology opportunity. We spent a lot of time, I think today, I just explained to you what's happening with glaucoma, and that's targeting the CB1 receptor. But there's other receptors in the eye that make a lot of sense for ocular diseases, and they relate to a whole range of different applications in the ocular setting. So we talked about intraocular pressure already, but what about reducing pain? Trauma, eye injuries, pain makes a lot of sense. Inflammation, wound healing, the neuroprotection aspect is a big opportunity, and looking at even things like anti-fibrosis. So lots of opportunity. I think the first part of our objective here is to show data in the glaucoma setting. What's informing our approach here in terms of our broader pipeline development is a proprietary screening platform. This is a proven model in terms of drug development. It helps us identify the stages that are necessary before we make the big decision of betting the multi-million dollars that goes into the clinical setting. And this is just a visual of the discovery engine that we have. So we have a whole range of additional molecules beyond SPI 100. We're continuing to screen them in our platform, then we'll test them, and we have been testing in vivo models, and then it'll help us identify what disease we're going to go into next. So there's another molecule that's already pretty far along. We haven't spent enough time talking about that today. And then there's a pretty large library underneath that. So the idea here is to continue to demonstrate long-term value creation for investors. We're not spending a lot of money on this activity, but the R&D helps to support the clinical objectives as well. So back to the investment summary, I think that kind of helps to highlight the broad strokes that are presented on this particular slide. In terms of the report card, next time we all meet with each other, I think this is the key kind of takeaway here in terms of the milestones ahead of us. So quite an exciting year for us in terms of phase 1 and phase 2 development. You can save this, and we should use it as a continued evaluation in terms of our performance on that roadmap from point A to point B. If we execute against these particular milestones, I think that's a big value event for our investors as well as for different stakeholders. And most importantly, it's helping to de-risk in terms of this drug development. I briefly touched on the management. So my background prior to joining this company was in cancer immunotherapy. I founded and ran a company for almost 9 years. Prior to that, worked for an immunotherapy and infectious disease company. So been in the industry for about 20 years. We had multiple exits or different licensing opportunities with big pharma like Merck, most recently. Prior to that, Wyeth. I did a deal in between, working on a collaboration with BMS. So we've done a lot of different things, and the team that has been assembled, we've worked together in the last 2 decades in these different companies. Bernie's in the back. He's our head of corporate communications and investor relations, so he's here at the conference and at the table there. So please, anytime you want to reach out, we're here to ask and answer any questions. Board of directors is also composed of the same type of experience, ophthalmology expertise. A few of the members of the board have launched the drugs that I've even referenced in the slide deck today. They have been C-level executives at big pharma, and then we also have collective kind of biotech experience. And then similarly on the clinical and scientific, it's been divided into 2 kind of important groups, the cannabinoid expertise. So together, Dr. Appendino and Dr. Muniz, they've published over 200 papers. So we have a very strong kind of center of excellence in terms of that expertise. And then on the clinical, it's focused on the ophthalmology development side. So we're quite pleased with the team that's around us. It's really helped to streamline our decision making. We run a really lean company, and we're excited about creating value for investors. I'll finally kind of end. It's an interesting kind of obviously market and opportunity. I think biotech is constantly in this ebb and flow that comes with the market. The one constant is that there is a very clear kind of roadmap that biotech has. You're investing into drug development to de-risk a particular drug, get it to an important inflection point and license it out. And the way that the value is created in these types of companies is outperformance, right? In these growth companies, it's really predicated on doing it better and operational excellence. That's what's going to help kind of separate some of these companies to get to the top. So I'm quite excited about doing that. I think we have a very operational disciplined team, and I'll save a few minutes for any questions.
Anyone have any questions for Punit?
Good morning. Have you determined the effectiveness in terms of the stages of glaucoma? Like if a person is completely blind, does this have the ability to reverse it, or is this more so for people that are at stage 1 and it can kind of stop it or reverse it going from that point forward?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I won't repeat the questions because they're pretty audible for everyone. We're focused on open-angle glaucoma, which is primary open-angle glaucoma. So it's the main form of glaucoma. Yes, there is segregation in terms of severity of those patients. At this point, we haven't done that. In our phase 2 clinical trial, it will continue to delineate in terms of how aggressive we're going. But right now, we would like to go as aggressive as possible in terms of the broad population. The primary measurement that you're looking for is lowering of this intraocular pressure.
Questions? Thank you, Punit.
Thanks.